welcome, Andrea. Andrea is a very interesting person. We had a conversation the other day. She's a dancer. I was going to say a former dancer, but you still dance. I don't think that's something you ever give up.
No.
But also worked in social work, and you've done an amazing number of things as typical ADHDer with an sort of a wobbly career path. But you brought a lot to the table in terms of social cues, reading social cues. And I you won't admit it, but I suspect that it probably has a lot to do with your skill as a dancer and the idea of knowing your body and knowing where it is and knowing where the other bodies are that you're interacting with and how they're behaving, and reading all of those cues probably played into it. Because after our conversation that we had the other day, like, I never realized before we talked how physical an activity social interaction was, right? I thought it was all about what you do in your head. So that was very interesting. Let's back up. Let's start there. We know that ADHDers struggle with reading social cues, with getting along with people. Sometimes people tend to kind of wonder sometimes what track we're on or what conversation we're listening to when we interject with our story that was maybe 3 points ago that they've now moved on from, and we just managed to get it in there, or we interrupt right in the middle because we don't want to forget about what we were talking about. And so reading social cues is something that we're just not innately good at, I don't think, but you can learn to do that. And you had some really cool stuff that you were going to share with us that would help us learn to do that. But why don't let me shut up for a minute and tell us who you are and all about social cues and what you're going to share with us tonight.
Sure. Well, in terms of my past, I sort of call myself a mongrel. And I think that Heinz 57, right? I have done a lot of things like most people with ADHD, but I used to talk much more than I do now. I've gained a certain amount of regulation there, but I have a story about how social cues really came to my attention. I was sitting in a coffee shop with a friend, and I was talking away. And he suddenly said, "Andrea, you've got to land the plane." And I looked at him and he said, you have to start noticing when people want to end a conversation. And this was news to me, to say the least. And I somehow heard him, and it opened the door to my starting to actually look at other people, begin to pick up on some of what was happening with them. And in fact, learning, for instance, that to end a conversation, you see somebody perhaps glance at their coat if it's sitting beside them, or you might see them put down their pen with finality if it's a meeting and sort of sit back, or they might glance at a clock on the wall or the door. So I now am really good at reading the ends of things. Still, of course, problems along the way, but I've struggled for many years to recognize these cues, and I think because they are body-based, I have something to share about how we can all begin to notice these in our exchanges.
So that's what I was just noticing about even what you gave as examples here. When I think of a conversation, I think of me listening and them hearing and vice versa. And if I wanted to listen for cues, I just said it. I would listen for cues. I wouldn't look for cues. I wouldn't even think that it's such a physical thing, right? I'm not noticing. To me, they're just fidgeting.
Yes.
Right? Most of us are bouncing around all the time anyway. So that's very cool. Okay. So how can we tap into that?
Well, it's a good question. And what I think is that because the nonverbal is body-based, it's about physicality, and it's about one's own physicality and what we're expressing also to people, as well as what they are expressing to us. I'm going to suggest that we just start with a few exercises, very simple exercises, just to activate our bodies. So everyone, let's start by just rubbing your hands together sort of vigorously. Get them kind of warm. And just to feel the warmth, just place them on your cheeks for a moment. They should be somewhat warm. Then link your fingers and stretch up overhead. And really stretch as much as you can, like let the shoulders lift way up and go to one side a little bit and the other side a little bit. And then just let the arms come down the side. And now we'll just take 3 breaths with the arms going up. So we're going to count in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and down, 2, 3, 4. Great. So if everybody did that with me, let's do 2 more. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4, holding up, 2, 3, 4, and down. Breathing out the whole way, 4, and hold. And 1 more, 3, 4, and arms up the side while your lungs expand. Hands meet at the top. Hold the breath for 4, and coming down, 3, and 4. And now just take your hands and just put them on your, a little above your knees, and just push down into your knees and see how that helps you sit up a bit. And that's all we'll do with body work, but hopefully your body, you're a bit more aware, a bit more sensitized, maybe some of your senses are a bit activated, and hopefully somewhat open to the other person that is across from you. So these are pretty simple. You can do them, hide in a corner and do them just to have a sense of getting into your body.
And does this, I know this is a silly question, but during pandemic, does this work across Zoom? Like because I'm watching, I guess, your body, and so I'm sensing my body, so that it must help me notice that even virtually.
I think so, although it's a little more limited. We can't see somebody, for instance, turn their feet towards the doors if they want to go.
Right, but I mean, we can see if they're leaning forward, or if they're
absolutely,
or
yes, or if they're nodding. I tend to move a lot when I talk, so it's easy to see what I'm thinking in some ways. And just to emphasize that, what's nonverbal is still like a thought. It's still an expression. If somebody's kind of hunched, they could be cold or they could be nervous. So they're saying without words, I'm a little nervous here. And they might not be aware that they are saying they're nervous. But if we can pick that up, we can calm ourselves down and think, wow, they look nervous. I think let's try and calm things down here.
Right on. And Rick, as Rick pointed out, on Zoom, we can read facial expressions for sure.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so that's very cool. Okay, so you've already given me more information than I knew about social cues probably in my entire life. How am I going to absorb all of this? Like, that's a lot to learn. How do we get started, and what do we do with it?
It's not just a lot to learn, it's a lot to use. It has to be sort of integrated or incorporated would be the word, so that we can begin to use it. But, and we talked about this, for many people with ADHD, the way to learn is to set up external structures or scaffolds, and that means setting up words. We'll talk about tone of voice, talk about facial expression, talk about hand gestures. and begin to, those will be sort of like doors that are opening to a lot of information that will gradually build over time. It's a process. But once we have a bit of a scaffold, is a good word for it, of some information about social cues going in our head, we can add other things more easily than if we had nothing
right,
about social cues in our
and
head.
I would be willing to bet that if we notice some cues and we start to notice is, oh, look at that, this works.
Mhm.
We'll then start to build on that by noticing other things. And it's much easier to learn more from something than it is to learn something from nothing. Right?
Exactly.
Starting from zero is very hard, but once you've got that
one of my
scaffolding,
professors once said that it's like having a coat hook in the mind. If you have a coat hook for the subject, you know, you might throw in this coat and throw in that, but there's a hook for it to land on. If there's no hook, it just falls down. So this truly is an introduction to the nonverbal and what it says and expresses.
Okay. So we're going to take, so we can take that and we can start to put the pieces together to fill in the puzzle. And probably, you know, before we even finish the puzzle, there will be enough there that we can recognize the picture and start to make some progress with it. Okay.
And I'd really suggest, one of my suggestions for the end actually was just to go forth and watch other people talk when you're not involved in a conversation. Just watch them and see what's happening. You might see people being totally miscuing each other. You might see people who are really synced up. So that's another way to absorb information. So yes,
spying on people.
Indeed, become a spy in the social world.
Right.
That'll be the title of my book, is The Spy in the Social World. Yes.
Nice. Okay. Very cool.
But then also, the nonverbal, there's a lot happening, and I like to think of it as talking is like a melody, and the nonverbal levels are like accompaniment, like a chord or another instrument. So we're talking the melody, but our posture, for instance, might be nice and straight. It might be a little slumped. So that's there at the same time. Then we have tone of voice is there at the same time. And then might have some hand gestures at the same time. So it's multi-layered and spontaneous.
So there's a lot going, there's obviously a lot going on. Well, I guess like a piece of music, you know, with the different layers of the, you know, you have the sort of the backbeat, and then the drums and the bass are playing, and then I mean, even rhythm guitar on top of that. And as you can see, I'm a rocker, and you know, lead guitar is on top of that, and all of them, and then the lyrics and the melody, all of those different layers are happening. I wouldn't even pretend to be able to play them, but I can certainly appreciate good music.
Yes.
So, and probably you're better at some elements of this than other elements of this.
Yes, that's something to recognize. Yeah, definitely. You know, you might find you have a real affinity for noticing what hands are doing. And hands can be tapping the table nervously, or they could be folded and calm. But I do want to add that since there's so much going on at once, I would suggest just pick one thing to notice, like your next conversation. I'm just going to notice how that person is sitting, their general posture. Or I'm really going to notice at about a glance at my clock. I hope I remember to glance at my clock. At around 10 minutes, I'm going to start to look to see maybe they're going to do something that will tell me this conversation is over. So you can give yourself a little assignment as you go into conversations. And you could give yourself an assignment for yourself. I want to stay calm during this conversation. So I'm just going to activate my body a little, place my hands on my knees so that
This sounds like something fantastic to practice in all of those long Zoom meetings that we get stuck in. You know, if we're not the center of attention and we've been called to the meeting, but the conversation is going on between other people, it's the perfect opportunity read the signs and see if you can figure out what's really going on or what's going on.
Yep.
That's very interesting. Okay, so we did those exercises and I activated my body. That's going to help me notice my body. It's also going to help you, and actually that's very important because oftentimes I get clues about what I'm thinking from my body before I even before it's even a conscious thought.
Yes.
You know, I'll get signals from my body, so that would be important. I assume then because I'm noticing my body more, I'm going to notice what you're doing as well physically.
Yes.
More, right?
I think it's like opening up a channel between the two people. If you're sitting and you're not really aware of your body and you're kind of closed off, it's hard to receive signals. But if you have an understanding that there's a channel, you're sending signals, they receive the signals, they send signals back, you receive their signals. It's like, playing catch.
It's a very active process, isn't it? It's you create this this energy between you.
Yeah.
That's a different entity almost. I don't know if it's an entity, but I mean, the conversation is a thing.
It's an enlarged experience.
And I like that. Yeah.
Yes. It's an enlarged experience of self and other, and understanding that there's always flow between self and other.
Right on.
Which can be overwhelming, but we can learn how to sort of, Yeah.
Somebody in the chat said, listening with your eyes, which is actually kind of cool. I like that. We often think of listening as a mental process. And really what we're doing is we're saying it's much more than that. It's there's a huge physical aspect to it. I mean, just hearing works. It's physically, right? It's a physical action in the body to get those signals to your brain. Okay, so that's very cool. Now,
and the way we activate that is simply by thinking it. We say, I'm going to use my eyes more. You put it into words. It's really the imagination at work when we're involved. We're imagining the channel. We're imagining receiving the signals. We're imagining that my ear is I don't know, there's a little one of those tin horns in there that's expanding the sound as it comes in.
I like to think of a guy beating on a drum.
Yeah.
Little tiny guy.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So now so we've got this physical and energy channel going back and forth, but there's a lot else going on as well that we haven't even talked about. And I'm not talking about the speech. I'm talking about the mental gerbil running around in our head that's carrying on this entire conversation. So many people have told me growing up through the years that, we're usually listening, but only with sort of half of our brain, because the other half is preparing our argument or our response, or we're not even going to get the whole thing. We want to jump in and counteract that. So what about that inner voice? Does any of this help that, or?
I think it does, because it provides a focus that is positive and that hopefully people want to use. So it's like distracting a child. If you say, no, don't do that, you're not giving much information about what to do. But if you say to yourself, I really want to listen and hear those words, and literally the air is vibrating. There are vibrations that travel into our ear and are interpreted by physical elements within the ear, which becomes words in our brain. So I think one way to start to work with it is to turn focus towards something, noticing and then becoming aware. But noticing is really the first step. Noticing I'm closed off today, or gee, I'm really fiddling with my hands. I'd like to breathe and calm down and have my hands, just sit comfortably in my lap.
That's interesting, because because as you were saying, the first step is noticing, and I immediately thought that I was supposed to be noticing the other person, but you referred to yourself. So step number one is noticing how you're feeling and how you're acting and behaving,
Yes.
and you're right.
Yes. And it's all going on at once, unfortunately, but yes,
Sure.
Noticing where one is as you go into a conversation and during it really helps the exchange. Will be clearer to the other person as well, I think. And I can offer a piece of advice for something. Sometimes when we're noticing things, we get lots of bits and pieces of information. You might start thinking about what I'm going to eat later. I learned something from somebody. They back burner thoughts and feelings that aren't part of what they're doing. So they literally say, oh, okay, I'm feeling hungry. I'm going to back burner that for now. I'll come back to it and let me pay attention to the conversation.
That's interesting. We usually just blurt it out. You talked about putting bits and pieces together. This is all happening at once and putting bits and pieces together. It's very interesting. It reminds me of, and I know this seems like a totally unrelated topic, but when I went through school and I studied accounting for 5 years, and finally realized that I had no interest whatsoever in being an accountant. But over the years, I did not understand accounting. I would get bits and pieces, and each year I would learn a little more and I would learn a little more. And it wasn't until after I graduated and went away and came back to it that all of a sudden I kind of saw how the puzzle pieces were put together, and it made sense. And then each individual part made much more sense as soon as I could step away and see the relationship between it. So it seems to me like you're saying that with this, we're going to learn about the hand signals. We're going to learn about body posture. We're going to learn about all of these different things, and we'll explore each one. And it may not seem that we master it initially, but as we put all the pieces together, then we will be able to play it, play the game completely.
Yes. And, a lot of what I'm saying, of course, are hard things for people with ADHD to do, focus on what you want to do. Right. So they're all skills, dancers, we just say practice, practice, practice. That's the solution for everything. Yeah, I will mention, I'm seeing some of the notes about back burner, and I'm sorry about that. It's a metaphor from a stove. You move something, something's, you're cooking with 4 elements and something's getting done. And you want to move it forward, you might take something and put it on the back burner for a while, so you don't have to pay attention to it. So that's what it means. That's perfect. So it's a way of dealing with information that isn't relevant in the moment. You don't shut it off or say this isn't happening. You just say, oh, I'm going to put that aside for the moment in my mental closet, and I can come back to that later.
Right on.
Yeah.
We are starting to get a few other questions as well.
Sure.
And this is kind of interesting. And I have a question that I'll come back to. So in this practice that we're doing, okay?
Yes.
So if you're able to notice social cues, so let's say that I notice that you're doing something, okay? Is there a way of getting feedback on those observations? So what I mean is, if I learn in school and then I give my answer on a test, and somebody will tell me, well, you're right, or you're wrong, or you're partly right and you got this wrong, and so on. Is there a way of getting feedback on what you're noticing? I noticed that, and it looks like they're about to get in a fight, but then they walk off calmly together, or like what happened there? What did I read that wrong? Or How could I go
And
about getting feedback?
I just have to excuse myself for 1 second. I have to plug in. I didn't anticipate using my cell phone, so I have to plug in my power.
Please do.
And that, oh, it goes on the bottom. Sorry. There we go. And now I must turn my phone sideways, so I'm going to be looking differently. I'm sorry about all that. Okay.
We've just been given a lesson in poise. There you go.
Oh,
Very nice.
really? Well, there you go. It didn't feel like that inside.
No panicking.
Okay. And I'm sorry, could you ask your question again?
Sure. Okay, so when we're looking for, we're learning how to read social cues.
Yes.
So we're looking at somebody and we're thinking, she's in a good mood.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
But how do I know that I'm right? You could be in a really bad, you could have gas. You could, we always talk about the first time a baby laughs, and
yeah.
Oh, look, the baby's smiling. No, and then they just burp. And it's like,
it can depend on the situation. I mean, sometimes it's okay to do kind of a reality check. Looks like you're really enjoying yourself. It looks like you feel a little puzzled. Am I right about that? And this makes us feel a little vulnerable to check in with people like that. But I think it's a good thing to experiment with and try. Because I have found it very useful. It's really easy to assume other people are thinking and feeling all sorts of things that they aren't.
That's true, because we've got that inner voice.
That's a reality check. Or afterwards, if somebody else is there, you can say, did you notice such and such? Or even the next time you meet that person, you might say, you know what? I think I talked a little too much last time we were together. It looked like maybe you were getting bored. Were you? And
That's
they
true.
could be honest, hopefully. And so these again are little bits of information that are being fit together gradually to construct more of a whole.
So one thing that's super useful for somebody with ADHD is to see real progress. Is there any way that we could notice improvement? And speaking personally, I actually had my wife, when I wanted to start working on actually being a people person, or at least being able to pass as a people person, because there were things in life that I wanted to do that I just, I was going to have to deal with other people. I asked her for help. I asked her to give me feedback on what I did right, what I did wrong, kick me under the table if I'm, getting too passionate about something and scaring people, that kind of thing. But if you don't have somebody like that, is there a way that you can do that, or could you recruit like a friend or a coworker to maybe coach you a little bit on that?
Yes, I think so. And some of us with ADHD, we have a lot of alone time. We might not necessarily have a big social circle. Could watch TV and watch what people are doing on TV and watch how they interact. And you sort of are building, some films inside your head. Or you might decide, in dance, one way to change and become better is to just say, I want to dance like that person. And you don't worry that it's copying or anything, you want to get that thing. And then gradually it becomes you, it becomes your thing. So maybe there's a person that you want to emulate. And you can sort of measure yourself a little bit against. And I think measuring something when you come away from a conversation, you might be able to say, well, I noticed their posture that time. This is good.
That's cool. Somebody mentioned in the chat, mirror activities.
Yes.
Can you practice some of this stuff in front of the mirror, or like, would you?
Well,
is that what that means?
Apparently, a great place to see mirroring is between babies and their caregivers. You really see a close connection between a crying baby and a concerned parent, or a happy baby and a happy parent. They are mirroring each other.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's not a mirror.
No,
it's
it's a
okay.
process. Yes. And again,
Gotcha.
in dance and theater classes, you often will do mirroring exercises where literally you stand opposite somebody. I move this hand, they move this hand, as if we're in a mirror.
Okay.
So
now,
mirroring it. So apparently there are mirror neurons. They are specially tasked with picking up information from others. And we can become more sensitive to all of this.
that's interesting. Okay. So now, when you're standing in front of somebody and you're doing these exercises, you're doing it to activate those mirroring neurons?
Yes.
Okay.
It sounds a little abstract, but if you're doing mirroring exercises in a dance class where you're supposed to be doing exactly the same as the other person, you definitely have a learning path there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It definitely takes time. And I do, I want to say again, really, these are complicated processes that we need to simplify to gradually build one piece at a time. And you might say to yourself, okay, for the next month, I'm just going to look at people's posture. That's
Sure.
enough,
But I find the idea of activating those, because just the whole physical activation made me more aware of your body position and my own body position and so on. So it makes sense that activating those mirror neurons would make me even more aware of your body position and versus my body position, and right. If I'm leaning in and you're leaning back, then whoops, I'm going to notice that.
Exactly.
Right? Right. If I have my arms open and you're like, I'm going to notice that, because it's, hey, you're not mirroring, something's going wrong, and I'll receive that signal. That's interesting.
Yeah. Leaning back and forward are definite cues. Often leaning back can mean a bit of anxiety or fear. And one could respond by just calming, your own body and say, oh, wow, they're leaning back. Maybe I'm being a little aggressive here and I should just calm down.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. So posture can tell a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Somebody here was asking, so has anyone tried headphones? I'm just going to, because this is relevant and an interesting question. Has anyone tried headphones that block out higher frequency noises to help you stay focused on only the speaker rather than other noises, like planes overhead, sirens, trains, other people talking loudly?
Some people are extra sensitive to sound. I know that, and it is a problem. And
I know it was a problem for my father-in-law. Had a real problem with that because his hearing aid, the way it worked, it didn't isolate anything. It just amplified absolutely everything. So and it seemed to amplify it equally. So like standing next to him, he could hear you very well, but he could also hear the person on the other side of the room talking just as well. It was very annoying. So I can imagine
I think we can learn to take care of ourselves in some way with these things, and just noticing and knowing, I really want to find some way that this doesn't disturb me as much, or I really don't know about blocking out high noises, people who get distracted by that, I have to say.
No, you could ask to conduct your conversation in a quieter place. Could we, here, let's go someplace quieter. We could do that.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Or, at times I'm a survivor of abuse. And if people start talking really fast in front of me, I start getting frightened. It's not their fault. Something about talking fast really triggers me. So I actually will say to people, you're talking kind of fast for me. Not accusatory, just making, this is when people go that fast, I stop being able to really understand, could we slow down a little? I know. And I've said that around loudness too. My brother can get a little loud. So brothers aren't necessarily the best people in terms of responding to requests from sisters, but we can still say, or could we stand a bit further apart? Find a way to cope and own it. I'm kind of sensitive to this sort of thing. Could we?
Right. I noticed that you said you presented it as I'm a little sensitive to this thing. One of the things that I often hear from people is they don't bring it up because they feel they have to give the whole story. Right. And they, I remember one guy was saying, I'm looking for a new job. They called me for an interview at another place on Friday, but I can't go because if I tell my boss, my current boss, that I need an hour off on Friday, he's going to ask me why, and I'll have to tell him. And he just never imagined that there was a different way of presenting that, like, I need an hour off on Friday, a personal appointment, or,
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I like the way that you presented that. It
Yes.
was, right.
And
You can
people
give
with
enough
ADHD
information without.
Yeah, something that's always happening, so I've really learned to just could we slow down for a minute? I need to catch up. Or if somebody at work is talking too fast, you know what, I'm going to take notes. I really want to remember this. That slows people down.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
And slowing down and speeding up, these are physical activities,
Right.
so, and just to give a hint about something I do, I can talk too fast. Also, thinking about a slow song can help us slow down a little bit.
Ah, there you go. And then they'll wonder why you're saying lyrics in your in the
Right.
middle of your conversation. But
Yes.
Here's a good question. Do these guiding principles, so we've talked about a lot of these, hand movements and what they mean and body movements and what they mean, but do these principles change if we're talking to somebody with, so let's say they have poor social skills, another ADD perhaps, or from a different cultural background?
Yes.
Or even say somebody with autism or ADHD or under the influence, or they have dementia, like there could be any number of different things that they have. Are there adjustments that you have to make to this that we can
You mean
sort of
adjust to the other
generalize?
person? Adjust to the other person yourself?
Well, adjust to the other person, but also understanding the other person. Like if you talk to, and I'm from Quebec, so there's a lot of French people here. So when we talk, it's much, that doesn't mean that I'm angry. That might mean that I'm speaking French.
Yes.
You see?
Right.
That's just one of the way, like we can tell somebody's sort of mother tongue based on their hand movements. I know that sounds really weird, but
no, actually, that's a really great point, because of course, I'm speaking from the point of view of Western culture.
Right.
So definitely other cultures have very different bodily feelings and senses and ways of being. So I spent some time in an Indigenous community up north here in Canada. And my book would be called Cultural Mistakes Among the Ojibwe. But one of them was around movement and talking fast. In this community, talking fast and moving too much was just not part of thing. I don't know how else to say it.
Right.
So
in as much of a hurry.
Maybe that's it. Or there's more of a sense of things happening in the fullness of time.
Right.
So but that's reflected in the way things are done, the way bodies move, and the way you might meet and go apart and then meet again.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So it obviously learning what those social cues are is going to be a similar process, because you're going to, if you want to understand that culture, then you best observe the people in that culture. You're not going to be able to, watch Western movies to understand how the Ojibwe social cues work, sort of thing. You're
Yeah.
much better,
Yeah.
right?
And yes, and you know, we tend to assume we know what other hand gestures mean, but being able to say to oneself, wow, I'm with somebody I don't get, we're from really different backgrounds. I shouldn't assume anything here. And maybe I should
Right.
even check and ask about some things, just, you know, be vulnerable and honest.
Okay, very cool. There's another question here, and I have to say, we're running out of time, so we have to be careful. But how do we deal with someone who takes mimicking too far? For example, at work, where our contributions are counted. Okay, I'm not sure about the contributions part, but I mean,
Was it the term mimicking, where somebody takes mimicking?
yeah, it takes mimicking too far. And I've seen that as a
Yes.
way of teasing people to just do
Yes.
everything that they do, and
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, that makes me insanely angry. My brother used to do that. Like insane. So yes, you know, at work, it's a whole different thing. I mean, I mean, it can be hard. Sometimes you can't talk right to that person. It just ain't going to happen because of the type of person they are. But I think caring for yourself is very important. Going to your supervisor or HR, or sometimes you just got to put your foot down and just say, look, I'm going to ask you not to do that anymore. And you play what's called broken record. You say the same thing to them. Please don't do that. I don't want you to do that. You know,
Right.
Don't mimic me. Yeah, that's a tricky, especially at work. That would be very difficult.
That would be difficult,
But
course,
clear directions and a short statement and say it over and over. Please don't mimic me.
You know, you can try to ignore it. And you can try to report it, but sometimes it's just a toxic environment. The key is not to lose it.
Yes.
Because then it'll be your fault.
It tells you more about them, the fact that they're mimicking you, than it tells you about yourself. I mean, it's telling you that they are very uncomfortable and don't know what to do with themselves. So
Right.
maybe, you know, understanding that can help one step back and not become insanely angry.
Right on. Rick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think this goes along with what you were just getting into, but Patricia had an interesting question, which I think is worth addressing. We're talking about how to recognize cues in other people, so we're not blindsided and, you know, etc. So we can react better to them. But how do you react to some of these things? Some of these things might trigger us to be really upset or really nervous or whatever, whole range of different things. So when something happens, I think with ADHD, we have a tendency to just instantly react, but how do we kind of control that reaction and react?
Yes. Well, I think it's a process again, unfortunately, and the reaction thing it's very true. And I have a friend who reacts much more than me, and I actually get startled. She says, "Oh no!" And so it's the first time that I've gone like, "Wow, that's a big reaction." So here's a metaphor I like to use. I don't think we really control these things. We regulate them, just like a tap of water. We turn on a tap and we want more and less water. We need to somehow learn within ourselves to regulate, to begin to down-regulate or up-regulate, or have a term that we say to ourselves. I even just say, I don't want to react as much. We begin to teach ourselves to start to do things. And frankly, I will sometimes just say, you know what, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Could we take a break? Could we pick this up later? Because feeling overwhelmed can happen really easily, especially with difficult feelings. Difficult feelings is a hard one. And it's one of the things I've learned to sort of, as I say, back burner, to say oh, wow, I'm feeling really triggered, but I know this person doesn't mean it at all. I'm not going to deny it. this emotion, this fear, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to you later, fear, so that I can stay present with this.
Okay,
That was sort of a long
interesting.
answer. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's great.
If I might follow up with that just a tiny bit, my own self, when someone says something that's kind of triggering to me, and they don't know that it is, right? It's my baggage.
Exactly. It's not their fault.
When they say something, I kind of have a deer in the headlights poker face for a short time while my brain tries to catch up and say, okay, what are you going to do about this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, knowing that you get a poker face, that can be one of your warnings.
Yeah.
Like you might feel your face become like that before you have a word or a real feeling. And I've learned to read some, like if I start to squish my toes, I know I'm nervous. I might not be feeling nervous, but I go, oh, I guess I'm kind of nervous here. I'm going to take a breath.
I've noticed that too. When I'm about to, when something is making me upset, I may not even notice what is making me upset yet, but I can feel the heat rise in my neck, right? And I've learned that when that starts to rise, I need to take a break from, even if I can't figure out what it is, it's time for a bathroom break or it's time for a whatever, and step away so that I can figure this out and calm down.
And I think taking care of ourselves is sort of a prime directive. I've even said, oh, I'm suddenly not feeling very well. I think I need to go, blah, blah. Or, you're not hurting anybody, even though you're making it up, and you're taking care of yourself. And it can be the best way to exit some situations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rick, we started a couple of minutes late, but I know that you may have somebody scheduled right after us in this room. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Andraya.
Yeah, I need to report that I only have 3% of my battery left on my cell phone.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
Tell us.
I had everything else charged up, tablets,
Quickly tell us.
Yes.
Are you teaching a master class at Renify?
Yes, I will be teaching a class in job interview skills, but it's not the type of class where somebody tells you do this, do this, do this. This is going to be experiential. We're going to learn a bit more about being in our bodies and presenting at a job interview, presenting our upper bodies as a calm person who is interested and knowledgeable. We'll be working on self-stories to practice telling of a few sentences that will let people know about your skills, your experience. We're going to be working on short sentences and how to edit ourselves right in the situation. There's a lot of details within that class that we will be working on and having experience with, because I know that it's one thing to be told, be polite. It's another thing to have somebody say, let's practice please and thank you. I'll say please, you say thank you.
That's right.
Yeah, I might say, along the job interview skills, I don't coach that many people, but two of the people I'm working with, they're both in later stages of job interviews. And this kind of information is really important to get across, because whether you're really good at a job or not, it's not always the thing that gets you that job.
No.
And your interview skills, you got to get through the door somehow to prove yourself. Right. So I think these things are really important. And in the ADHD world, sometimes we're very painfully not self-aware of these different things that we're doing. And
yes, absolutely. I want to quickly mention, one of the things that I talked about with Dwayne was what I call secret fiddles, which are doing something that can't be seen. Like you can be sitting with your hands in your lap and fiddling with two fingers behind, or if somebody's at a desk, you can fiddle with your foot, or you can even put your hand under your chair a little bit. And so you find little ways to let off energy. I'm at 2%.
Yeah, we should wrap up. I don't know, we might actually have something that starts at the top of the hour here. So we should wrap up. But
okay,
this has been great, Andrea. Thank you.
Oh,
thank you so much, Andrea. You grace under fire. Couldn't get in. Your battery is running low, and still you handled it all calmly. Very admirable. Everybody should take your course to learn how to do that. Wow. right?
I'd be happy to help transfer that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I know you're going to drop off in just a second.
Yes. Thank
So
you,
that's fine.
everybody.
Thanks. And of course, I'm Dwayne Gordon from ADA. Rick and Renify invite me over every month to get to ask questions of all these different experts and share their knowledge. And we have lots of places for you to practice over at ADA. ADA is a community organization. We have support groups, we have workshops, we have accountability buddies that you can work on these things with. It's just a wonderful place. And as Rick always says, it's a rounding error on your paycheck. It's $5 a month. And if you don't believe me, 2 months free, go to add.org/gift. And you can get your first 2 months membership free and try out all of the stuff.
And don't forget to start to spy on your neighbors.
There you go.
That'll go over big time.
Perfect.
guys.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thanks for
Thank
everybody
you.
for coming. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.